June 1985. Miguel Cardenas, a 51-year-old tailor from Medellin, received an offer that would define the next 8 years of his life. Pablo Escobar needed a personal tailor, someone who could make custom suits that fit perfectly, look professional, and contain special features that ordinary suits didn't have. The pay was exceptional, 10 times what Miguel made from his regular clients. All he had to do was make suits for Pablo, keep his mouth shut about the special features, and never ask questions. Miguel said yes. For the next 8 years, from 1985 to 1993, Miguel made more than 1,000 suits for Pablo Escobar. And into every single one, he sewed a secret pocket, a hidden compartment that couldn't be detected by casual inspection or even by professional searches. And inside each pocket, Miguel placed items that Pablo specified, items that could save Pablo's life if he ever needed them. Cash for bribes, fake IDs for escape, razor blades for cutting restraints, poison capsules for suicide if capture was inevitable. And in 2023, 30 years after Pablo's death, one of those suits was sold at auction. The new owner took it to a tailor for alterations, and the tailor found the secret pocket, found what was inside, and realized that every suit Pablo Escobar had ever worn was a survival kit disguised as clothing. Miguel Cardenas had been a tailor since he was 14 years old, had learned the trade from his uncle, who ran a small tailoring shop in Medellin. Miguel was exceptionally skilled, could measure a client by eye, could cut fabric with perfect precision, could sew seams that were invisible, could make suits that fit like they'd been painted on. That skill, that attention to detail, was what caught Pablo Escobar's attention. Pablo's people approached Miguel in 1985, told him that Pablo needed a tailor who could do special work that required discretion and technical skill, work that most tailors couldn't or wouldn't do. They offered Miguel a salary that was almost obscene, told him he'd be making suits for one of the most powerful men in Colombia, told him that if he did good work, if he kept secrets, he'd be set for life. Miguel's first meeting with Pablo was in June 1985 at one of Pablo's estates. Pablo explained what he wanted. Custom suits, Italian fabric, perfect fit, professional appearance, but with modifications, special features that Pablo needed for security reasons. I need hidden pockets, Pablo said, in every suit. Pockets that can't be seen or felt from the outside. Pockets that won't show up on X-rays or metal detectors. Pockets that only I know about. Can you do that? Miguel said yes. He'd made hidden pockets before for clients who wanted to carry valuables discreetly, for travelers who wanted to hide cash from pickpockets. But Pablo's requirements were more sophisticated. The pockets needed to be completely invisible, needed to be accessible quickly, needed to be large enough to hold specific items, and needed to be sewn into every suit in slightly different locations so that if someone found one pocket, they wouldn't know where to look for the next one. Miguel designed a system. For each suit, he'd create a hidden pocket in the lining, sometimes in the jacket, sometimes in the pants, sometimes in the vest if the suit had one. The pocket would be sewn between the outer fabric and the inner lining, accessible through a concealed opening that looked like a normal seam. The opening would be secured with tiny snaps that could be opened with pressure but wouldn't come undone accidentally. And the pocket would be lined with a thin, flexible material that wouldn't create bulk or change the drape of the suit. Pablo approved the design, told Miguel to make a test suit. Miguel made it. Pablo tested it, wore it for a week, had his bodyguards search him multiple times. Nobody found the hidden pocket. Pablo was satisfied. Make me 50 suits, Pablo said. Make me 50 suits, Pablo said, all with hidden pockets, and I'll tell you what to put in each one. For the first batch of suits, Pablo gave Miguel specific items to place in the pockets. In some suits, $10,000 in US $100 bills, vacuum sealed in plastic. In others, fake identification documents with Pablo's photo but different names. In others, small tools, razor blades, lockpicks, a tiny compass, waterproof matches. In a few suits, poison capsules. Cyanide, Pablo explained, in case he was ever captured and wanted to end things on his own terms rather than face trial or torture. Miguel sewed the items into the pockets, sealed them carefully, made sure they were secure but accessible, and delivered the suits to Pablo. Pablo was pleased, ordered 50 more suits, then 50 more, then 100. Over the next 8 years, Miguel made more than 1,000 suits for Pablo, and every single one had a hidden pocket with something inside. The items varied depending on what Pablo thought he might need. During the late 1980s, when Pablo was at the height of his power, the pockets mostly contained cash and fake IDs, escape tools in case he needed to flee quickly. During the early 1990s, when the Colombian government and Los Pepas were hunting him, the pockets contained more defensive items. Razor blades for cutting ropes if he was tied up, lockpicks for escaping from handcuffs, poison capsules for suicide. Pablo was preparing for every possible scenario, every possible threat, and his suits were his insurance policy. Miguel never asked why Pablo needed these things, never questioned the paranoia that drove Pablo to turn every piece of clothing into a survival kit, just did his job, made the suits, sewed the pockets, placed the items, kept the secret, and got paid handsomely for it. But Miguel did notice things. Noticed that Pablo's paranoia was increasing over time. Noticed that the items in the pockets were becoming more desperate, more focused on escape and suicide than on bribery and disguise. Noticed that Pablo was preparing not for success but for failure, for capture, for death. And Miguel wondered how long Pablo could live like that, how long anyone could live in a state of constant fear, constant preparation for the worst. The answer came in December 1993. Pablo Escobar was killed by Colombian police on a rooftop in Medellin. He was wearing one of Miguel's suits, a dark blue wool suit with a hidden pocket in the jacket lining. Inside the pocket, $5,000 in cash, a fake ID with the name Alvaro Villegas, and a cyanide capsule. Pablo never used any of it, never had time to reach for the pocket, never had a chance to escape or to end things on his own terms. Just died on the rooftop wearing a suit that was supposed to save him but didn't. Miguel heard about Pablo's death on the radio, felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that Pablo was gone, sadness that a client had died, guilt that he'd been part of Pablo's world, even in a small way, and curiosity about what had happened to all the other suits, the 1,000 suits he'd made over 8 years, the 1,000 hidden pockets, the 1,000 survival kits sewn into clothing. Most of the suits were seized by the Colombian government when Pablo's properties were raided. Some were auctioned off, some were given to museums, some were destroyed. Miguel assumed that someone, police, government officials, museum curators, had found the hidden pockets, had discovered Pablo's secret, had realized that every suit was more than just clothing. But nobody did. The pockets were too well hidden, too carefully sewn, too perfectly concealed, and for 30 years Pablo Escobar's suits sat in closets and museums and private collections, and nobody knew what was inside them. Until 2023, a collector in Bogota purchased one of Pablo's suits at an auction, paid $15,000 for it, a gray pinstripe suit that Pablo had worn in the late 1980s. The collector wanted to have the suit altered to fit him, wanted to wear a piece of history. He took it to a tailor in Bogota, a young tailor named Sofia, who specialized in vintage clothing restoration. Sofia examined the suit carefully, noticed that the lining seemed slightly thicker than normal, noticed a small irregularity in one of the seams, investigated, found the hidden pocket, opened it. Inside was $10,000 in US $100 bills, vacuum sealed in plastic, perfectly preserved after 30 years, and a handwritten note from Pablo, "For emergencies, use wisely. P.E. Sofia called the collector, told him what she'd found. The collector was shocked, called the auction house, asked if they'd known about the hidden pocket. They hadn't. Called a historian who specialized in Pablo Escobar. The historian was fascinated, suggested that other suits might have hidden pockets too. An investigation began. Museums that had Pablo's suits in their collections were contacted. Private collectors who owned Pablo's clothing were asked to have their items examined, and one by one, the hidden pockets were discovered. In a suit at the Museum of Memory in Bogota, fake IDs and $5,000. In a suit owned by a collector in Miami, razor blades and lockpicks. In a suit at a museum in Medellin, a cyanide capsule and a note that said, "Better death than surrender." By the end of 2023, investigators had examined 47 of Pablo's suits. Every single one had a hidden pocket, every single one contained items for survival or escape, and every single one had been sewn by Miguel Cardenas. Journalists tracked Miguel down in January 2024. He was 89 years old, retired, living in a small apartment in Medellin. They asked him about the suits, about the pockets, about why he'd done it. Miguel's answer was simple. Pablo paid me to make suits with hidden pockets. I made suits with hidden pockets. That was my job. I was a tailor. I sewed things. What Pablo put in the pockets, what he used them for, that was his business. I just did the work. The journalist asked, "Did you know what the items were for?" "Of course," Pablo told me. "Cash for bribes, fake IDs for escape, razor blades for cutting ropes, poison for suicide." He was preparing for every scenario, every possible threat. He was the most paranoid man I ever met, and the pockets were his way of feeling safe, his way of feeling like he had control, like he always had options. Did you ever try to talk him out of it? Try to tell him that living like that wasn't healthy? No, that wasn't my place. I was his tailor, not his therapist. He paid me to make suits. I made suits. What he did with them was his choice. Do you regret making the suits? Miguel thought about that for a long time. Then he said, "I regret working for Pablo. I regret being part of his world. I regret that my skills were used to help a criminal feel safer while he terrorized Colombia. But I don't regret the craftsmanship. Those suits were beautiful. The hidden pockets were perfectly sewn. Nobody found them for 30 years. That's good work. That's skill. And I'm proud of the skill, even if I'm ashamed of who I used it for." The discovery of the hidden pockets became international news. Pablo Escobar's suits were survival kits. Every suit had a secret pocket. The tailor who sewed Pablo's paranoia into clothing. The story fascinated people. Not because of the items in the pockets, cash and fake IDs and poison weren't surprising for someone like Pablo, but because of what the pockets revealed about Pablo's state of mind, about his paranoia, about his constant preparation for the worst, about the fact that he couldn't even get dressed in the morning without thinking about escape and death. Psychologists analyzed the hidden pockets, said they were a classic sign of extreme paranoia, said that Pablo's need to have survival tools in every piece of clothing showed that he never felt safe, never felt secure, was always preparing for capture or death, was living in a constant state of fear even when he was at the height of his power. Historians pointed out the irony. Pablo had spent millions of dollars on security, had bodyguards, safe houses, escape routes, informants, had built an entire infrastructure to protect himself. And yet he still felt the need to sew survival kits into his clothing, still felt the need to have poison capsules within reach at all times. The hidden pockets showed that no amount of security was ever enough for Pablo, that he would never feel safe no matter how much power he had. Fashion historians were fascinated by the technical skill required to create the pockets, examined the suits, marveled at how well the pockets were hidden, how perfectly they were sewn, how they didn't affect the fit or appearance of the suits, called Miguel's work masterful, said that the hidden pockets were some of the finest examples of concealment tailoring they'd ever seen, and collectors started looking for more of Pablo's suits, started checking their own collections, started having vintage clothing examined for hidden pockets. By mid-2024, 73 of Pablo's suits had been found and examined. All had hidden pockets, all contained items, and all had been made by Miguel Cardenas. Miguel Cardenas died in August 2024, 7 months after the hidden pockets were discovered. His obituary mentioned that he'd been a tailor for 75 years, that he'd worked for Pablo Escobar, that he'd made more than 1,000 suits with hidden pockets, that his work had been so skilled that the pockets went undiscovered for 30 years, that he'd been both proud of his craftsmanship and ashamed of who he'd used it for. At his funeral, one of his former apprentices said, "Miguel taught me that tailoring is about more than making clothes. It's about understanding what the client needs, what they fear, what they want to hide or protect." Pablo Escobar needed to feel safe, needed to feel like he always had options, and Miguel gave him that. Sewed it into every suit, made it invisible, made it perfect. That was Miguel's gift and his curse. He could make anything, even paranoia, look elegant. The story of Pablo Escobar's hidden pockets remains one of the most revealing tales from the drug war era, not because of what was in the pockets, but because of what the pockets represented. A man so paranoid that he turned his clothing into survival kits. A man so afraid of capture that he carried poison everywhere he went. A man so powerful that he could afford to have a tailor sew 1,000 hidden pockets, and so terrified that he felt he needed every single one. And it raises a question. What does it say about power when the most powerful man in Colombia felt the need to carry escape tools in his clothing? When he couldn't even wear a suit without thinking about death and capture? when he spent 8 years having a tailor sew paranoia into every piece of clothing he owned? The answer, perhaps, is that power doesn't bring security, doesn't bring peace, doesn't bring safety. Pablo Escobar had more power than almost anyone in Colombia, had more money than he could spend, had more security than most heads of state, and yet he still felt the need to have poison capsules sewn into his suits, still felt the need to prepare for the worst every single day, still felt the need to turn his clothing into insurance policies against capture and death. The hidden pockets were Pablo's admission that he knew how it would end, that he knew he'd eventually be caught or killed, that all his power and money and security wouldn't be enough, and so he prepared. Sewed survival kits into his clothing, carried escape tools everywhere he went, made sure that even if everything else failed, he'd have options. But in the end, the pockets didn't save him. The cash didn't buy his freedom. The fake IDs didn't help him escape. The poison didn't give him control over his death. He died on a rooftop, wearing a suit with a hidden pocket, and never had a chance to use what was inside. 1,000 suits, 1,000 hidden pockets, 1,000 survival kits, and none of them made any difference when the moment came. That's the real story of Miguel Cardenas and Pablo Escobar's suits. Not the craftsmanship, not the paranoia, but the futility. The realization that no amount of preparation, no amount of planning, no amount of hidden pockets and poison capsules and escape tools can protect you from the consequences of your choices. Pablo Escobar spent 8 years having a tailor sew secrets into his clothing, and in the end, the only secret that mattered was the one everyone already knew, that power built on violence always ends in violence, and no hidden pocket can change that.